Chapter 11. Where are we? Damn the particle, but there is salvation for the aggregate. A gust of wind is wild and free, but there are handcuffs on the storm. During the World War, of course, of a singular. Wait. During the World War, no course of a single bullet could have been predicted absolutely, but any competent mathematician could have written the equations of the conflict as a whole. This is an attempt by the theologians of science to admit the uncertainty principle and to cancel it. Similarly, I can't say that word. Reason the scientists of theology. What? Similarly, reason. I should have. Never mind. Reason the scientists of theology. The single records of the Bible may not be altogether accurate, but the good old book as a whole is immortal truth. Says Dr. C.G. Darwin in New Conceptions of Matter, we cannot say exactly what will happen to a single electron, but we can confidently estimate the probabilities. If an experiment is carried out with 1,000 electrons, what was a probability for one becomes nearly a certainty. Physical theory confidently predicts that the millions of electrons in our bodies will behave even more regularly, and that to find a case of noticeable departure from the average, we should have to wait for a time quite fantastically longer than the estimated age of the universe. This reasoning is based upon the scientific delusion that there are final bodies or wholes. Arthur B. Mitchell of 472 McAllister Avenue, Ithaca, New York, goes out for the evening. It can't be said exactly what will happen to a single cell of Mr. Mitchell's composition, but every wink of an eye or scratch of an ear of this body as a whole can be foretold. But now we have a change of view as to this body that had been regarded as a whole. Now, Mr. Mitchell is regarded as one of many units in this community known as Utica. Now, the admission is that Mr. Mitchell's conduct may be slightly irregular, but the contention is that the politics of Ithaca or Utica as a whole is never a surprise. But surprising things in Utica are reported. Well, Utica is only one of the many communities that make up the state of New York, but the state of New York. My own expression is that ours is an intermediate existence poised or fluctuating back and forth between two unrealizable extremes that may be called positiveness and negativeness. A hyphenated state of goodness, badness, coldness, heat, equilibrium, inequilibrium, uncertainty, certainty. I conceive of our existence as an organism in which positivizing and negativizing manifestations or conflicts are metabolic. Certainly, or regularity exists to a high degree in the movements of the planets, but not absolutely because of small unformulable digressions, and negativeness exists to a high degree in the freaks of a cyclone, though not absolutely because a still more frenzied state of eccentricity can always be thought of. My expression is that there are things, beings, and events that conform strikingly to regularized generalizations, but that also there are outrageous, silly, fiendish, bizarre, idiotic, monstrous things, beings, and events that illustrate just as strikingly universal imbecility, crime, or unformability, or fantasy. In the London newspapers last of March 1908 was told a story which, when starting off, was called What the Coroner for South Northumberland described as the most extraordinary case that he had ever investigated. The story was of a woman at Whitley Bay, near Blyth, England, who, according to her statement, had found her sister burned to death on an unscorched bed. This was the equivalence of the old stories of spontaneous combustion of human bodies. It was said that the coroner was at first puzzled by this story, but that he learned that the woman who had told it had been intoxicated and soon compelled her to admit that she had found her sister suffering from burns in another part of the house and had carried her to the bedroom. But in my experience with taboo, I have so many notes upon coroners who have seen to it that testimony was what it should be, and so many records of fires that, according to all that is supposed to be known of chemical affinity, should not have been, that between what should and what shouldn't, I am so confused that all that I can say about a story of a woman who had burned to death on an unscorched bed is that it is possible impossible. Looking over data, I note a case that has no bearing on the story of the burning woman on the unscorched bed, but that is a story of strange fires, or of fires that would be strange if stories of similar fires were not so common. It is a case that interests me because it aligns with the stories of Emma Pigott and John Dowdy. There was an occurrence, and it was followed by something else that seems related, but in terms of common knowledge, it cannot be maintained that between the first occurrence and the following occurrences there was a relationship. Most of the story was told in the London Times, August 21st, 1856, but whenever it is possible for me to do so, I go to local newspapers for what I call data. I take my various issues of the Belford Times and the Belford Mercury. Upon the 12th of August, 1856, a resident of Bedford named Moulton was absent from home. He was upon a business trip to Ireland. At home were Mrs. Moulton and the housemaid, Anne Fenimore. To fumigate the house, the girl burned sulfur in an earthenware jar on the floor. The burning sulfur ran out on the floor and set the house afire. This fire was put out. About an hour later, a mattress was found burning in another room. But the fire from the sulfur had not extended beyond one room, and this mattress was in another part of the house. Smoke was seen coming from a chest. Later, smoke was seen coming from a closet, and in it, linen was found burning. Other isolated fires broke out. Moulton was sent for and returned upon the evening of the 16th. He took off damp clothes and threw them on the floor. Next morning, these clothes were found afire. Then came a succession of about 40 fires in curtains, in closets, and in bureau drawers. Neighbors and policemen came in and were soon fearful for their safety. Not only objects around them flamed, so flamed their handkerchiefs. There were so many witnesses and so much talk in the town that there was an investigation. Considering that nobody was harmed, it seems queer to read that the investigation was a coroner's inquest, but the coroner was the official who took up the investigation. Witnesses told of such occurrences as picking up a pillow and setting it down, pillow flaming. There was an attempt to explain in commonplace terms, but nothing that could suggest arson was found, and Moulton had insured neither the house nor the furniture. The outstanding puzzlement was that an ordinary fire seemed to be in some way related to the fires that followed it, but in no way that could be defined. The verdict of the jury was that the fire from the burning sulfur was accidental, but that there was no evidence to show that it had caused the succeeding fires. This story attracted attention in London. After the first account in the Times, there was considerable correspondence. At the inquest, two physicians had given their opinion that the sulfur fire must have been the cause of the other fires, or that inflammable sulfurous fumes had probably spread throughout Moulton's house. But the jury had refused to accept this explanation because of testimony that chairs and sofas that had been carried out into the yard had flamed. The fires were in a period of 5 days, and it is probable that in that length of time any permeation by fumes would have been detected. In the discussion in the Times, it was pointed out that sulfurous fumes or oxides are not inflammable. However, I come to another fire, and maybe I'll explain this one. It was upon the night of January 21st, 1909. Upon this night, a small town woman exasperated a New York hotel clerk. Perhaps I explain her unusual behavior by thinking that, having come from a small town, she started picturing the dangers of the big city and let her imaginings become an obsession. The woman was Mrs. Mary Wells Jennings of Brewster, New York, the Greek Hotel, 30 East, 42nd Street. See the Brooklyn Eagle, January 22nd, 1909. Mrs. Jennings asked the night clerk to change her room, saying that she feared fire. The clerk assigned her to another room. Not long afterward, Wouldn't he let, wait, not long afterward, wouldn't he let her have another room? So another room. Again, she annoyed the clerk. Room changed again. A few hours later, in an unoccupied room where, during altercation, paints were stored, a fire broke out. St. Louis, Globe Democrat, December 16th, 1889. In some mysterious way, a fire started in the mahogany desk in the center of the office of the Secretary of War at Washington, D.C. Several official papers were destroyed, but it was said that they were of no especial value and could be replaced. Secretary Proctor cannot understand how the fire originated, as he does not smoke and keeps no matches about his desk. It may be that there have been other cases in which, in some mysterious way, have been destroyed papers that were of no especial value and could be replaced. Upon September 16, 1920, London newspapers told of 3 fires that had broken out simultaneously in different departments of the government office in Tothill Street, Westminster, London. It was not said that the papers Nope, it was not said that papers of no especial value had been destroyed, but it was said that these simultaneous fires had not been explained. London Sunday Express, May 2nd, 1920, upon the night of April 28th, fire of mysterious origin broke out at the War Office, Constantinople, where the archives are stored. The iron doors were locked, and it was impossible to gain entrance to the building until afternoon. Many important documents were destroyed. The body of a girl and the body of a crow, and a newspaper correspondent's vague feeling of an unknown relationship. A woman who was away from home. Upon the night of April 6, 1919, see the Dartford Kent Chronicle, April 7th. Mr. J. Temple Thurston was alone in his home, Hawley Manor, near Dartford. His wife was abroad. Particulars of the absence of his wife, or of anything leading to the absence of his wife, are missing. Something had broken up this home. The servants had been dismissed. Thurston was alone. At 2:40 o'clock, morning of April 7th, the firemen were called to Hawley Manor outside Thurston's room. The house was blazing, but in his room there was no fire. Thurston was dead. His body was scorched, but upon his clothes there was no trace of fire. I don't have to shut that off. Awesome. Got it.